The scent of blood hung in the air like an invisible mist, rich with notes of power, dominance, and fear. Serena Silverheart could feel that metallic odor clinging to her fair hair, seeping into the fibers of the simple dress she wore. Her heart hammered so forcefully against her ribs that she feared every alpha in the vicinity could hear it, especially him, King Darius Wolfcrown, ruler of the 7 territories. The Great Selection Ceremony occurred once every decade. All unmarked Omegas between 18 and 25 were required to present themselves in the Royal Ceremonial Hall for evaluation, classification, and distribution among high-ranking alphas. For some, it was cause for celebration. For Serena, it was a sentence. Being chosen meant losing what little freedom she still preserved. The ceremonial hall stood as a testament to the 7 territories' bloody history. Ancient stone walls adorned with battle-worn weapons, military standards from conquered lands, and tapestries depicting the unification wars of 3 decades past. Towering columns supported a vaulted ceiling where ethereal blue flames burned in suspended iron braziers, casting an otherworldly glow upon the assembled court below. Serena observed the alphas from her position among the other candidates. Unlike the nervous Omegas around her, she watched with quiet intensity as the powerful men discussed military strategies and territorial disputes. Their deep voices carried across the hall, speaking of border skirmishes with neighboring lands and defensive formations against potential invasions. "The Eastern Packs grow restless again," one gray-bearded general said to a younger commander. "Their scouts have been spotted near the Silver Mist River." "Let them come," the younger man replied, his hand resting on an ornate sidearm, a blend of ancient craftsmanship and modern technology that characterized their world. The energy barriers have been reinforced since the last incursion. Serena's attention shifted to the mystical protection that safeguarded their civilization. The shimmering, nearly invisible barriers powered by ancient runestones that protected major settlements from outside forces. She had only seen such technology once before, when traveling merchants had visited her remote village bearing small protective amulets. Her village. The thought brought a pang of longing for her simple life with her mother, Margot. Their small cottage nestled against the foothills had been a haven of healing herbs and quiet wisdom. The pendant around her neck, a hand-carved wolf with a tiny crystal embedded in the eye, was her only remaining connection to that life, her grandmother's final gift. "When everything seems darkest, remember that you see beyond what they perceive," had been her grandmother's last words. Back then, Serena hadn't understood. Now, standing before the royal court, those words were her only comfort. "Serena Silverheart, daughter of Margot, Omega Level 3, present yourself to the central circle," announced a deep, impersonal voice. Her legs trembled as she rose. The other candidates regarded her with a mixture of pity and relief. Relief that it wasn't them walking toward the center of the ornate hall, decorated with torches and ancient symbols. A wave of whispers rippled through the older members of the court. Serena caught fragments of their murmuring. "Those eyes. Just like her. Could it be?" She had been invisible until that moment. Now, all eyes evaluated her reproductive value, her submissiveness, her utility. As she walked, her fingers tightened around her grandmother's wooden pendant. The crystal eye seemed to pulse with an inner light, though perhaps it was merely reflecting the ceremonial flames. The central circle was an elevated circular platform surrounded by seats where the most powerful alphas sat on thrones of carved stone and wood. And at the center of that semicircle, imposing as a mountain of muscle, with black hair and eyes that seemed to contain storms, sat King Darius Wolfcrown, the alpha of alphas, the unquestioned sovereign of the 7 territories. During the 30 years of his reign, Darius had transformed their lands from warring factions into a unified kingdom. The tapestries along the walls told his story, a young warrior prince leading armies against rival packs, negotiating alliances, and ultimately creating an era of relative peace. The greatest alpha general in their history, now silver threading through his still thick black hair, his face bearing the scars of countless battles. "Approach," he ordered, his voice so low it resembled distant thunder rather than words. Serena obeyed with downcast eyes, as she had been taught. Submission was the only language she was supposed to know. Her bare feet touched the cold marble of the highest step, 2 meters from his throne. "Look at me." This was unusual. Omegas were not supposed to look directly at an alpha, much less the king. Serena hesitated, confused. "I said, 'Look at me, Omega.'" Slowly, she raised her eyes. First, she saw his black leather boots, then muscular legs covered in dark pants, the broad torso wrapped in a sleeveless tunic that revealed arms marked with battle scars. Finally, his angular face, severe, with a short, well-trimmed beard framing lips that seemed never to have smiled, and then his eyes, blue as ice, deep as marine abysses, fixed on her with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. It was at that moment that she felt an electric current running down her spine, a sensation of primordial recognition that should not exist. Ancient stories spoke of this, but they were considered foolish legends. The destined bond, the instinctive connection between predestined pairs. Impossible. She was merely an Omega of the 3rd category, daughter of a village healer with a useless ability, the capacity to sense others' emotions. The king rose abruptly, his chair scraping the floor with a sound that silenced the entire hall. He walked toward her, each step echoing like a harbinger of something momentous. He stopped centimeters away, so close that she could feel the heat emanating from his body. He inhaled deeply, capturing her scent, and something in his gaze changed. Surprise, anger, confusion, all mingled in an impenetrable expression. "Impossible," he murmured so quietly that only she could hear. Victor Blackthorne, an older alpha who served as the royal advisor, approached with concern. His salt-and-pepper hair and distinguished features belied a frame still powerful despite his 65 years. The ancient military medals adorning his formal attire spoke of a long service to the crown. "My king, is there something wrong with this Omega? Shall I have her removed?" Darius raised his hand, silencing him. His eyes never left Serena's as he spoke for the entire court to hear. "Tonight, I will make an unusual decision. This Omega will come to my chambers." A murmur of shock spread through the hall. The king never personally chose an Omega during the ceremony. He had his private harem, women of noble lineage, trained from birth to please him. Someone like Serena should not even be in his presence, much less in his chambers. "My king," Victor risked. "This Omega has no court training. She is of the 3rd category, daughter of a healer. Perhaps a more suitable choice." "Are you questioning my decision, advisor?" The king's voice was soft, but laden with threat. Victor immediately retreated. "Never, my king, merely concerned for your comfort." Darius turned back to face Serena, and she could feel something emanating from him. Not just power and authority, but also a deep, ancient pain buried beneath layers of rigid control. Her unwanted gift captured fragments of his inner tempest, terrifying her even more. "If you survive the night in my bed, Omega, you shall be free," he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Free to leave, if you so desire." New shock rippled through the assembly. No one was released after being chosen. The marking was permanent, the bond was for life. What he was proposing was unprecedented. "And if I don't survive?" The words escaped her lips before she could contain them, causing horrified gasps at her audacity. A cold smile touched the king's lips, the first she had seen on his face. "Then you will share the same fate as all the others who tried to occupy a place that did not belong to them." So there had been others before her. What happened to them? Her mind whirled with questions as guards approached to escort her. Before she was led away, she felt the king's fingers touch her chin, forcing her to keep her gaze fixed on his. "What is your gift, little Omega? What makes you special beyond those eyes that seem to read my soul?" She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of all eyes upon her. "I can sense emotions, my king, those of others." He remained motionless for a moment, and then let out a bitter laugh that echoed through the silent hall. "Then tonight will be even more interesting than I imagined. Take her and prepare her. I want her in my chambers at sunset." As the guards led her from the hall, Serena clutched the wolf pendant tightly. What would her grandmother say now? What kind of gift was it to feel others suffering without being able to do anything about it? What had she seen in the king's eyes? It wasn't just the ferocity of a predator. It was also the profound loneliness of someone carrying too heavy a burden. Serena was taken to a preparation room where beta servants stripped and bathed her in water perfumed with herbs. They scrubbed her skin until it turned red, washed her fair hair, and dressed her in a thin, transparent tunic that barely covered her body. One servant, older with kind eyes, approached while the others weren't looking. "Do not resist him," she whispered. "Be whatever he asks." "The others tried to defy him?" Serena asked, trembling. "And?" The woman merely shook her head, her eyes full of pity. "None survived the night. He carries a curse, they say, or perhaps it's just his rage. The king has known no mercy since he lost—" "Silence!" ordered the beta supervisor, approaching. "We do not poison the king's chosen with rumors. Finish preparing her. The sun is already setting." As they adorned her with small jewels and perfume, Serena's mind worked frantically. Why had the king chosen her? What was that strange sensation they felt when their gazes met? And what could she do to survive a night with a man who had apparently caused the death of other women before her? The most unusual aspect of the preparation was the application of temporary ritual markings on her skin, intricate patterns painted in silver ink that spiraled around her wrists and throat, symbols of ancient protection and binding that had been used in royal ceremonies for centuries. The beta women worked in silence as they applied these marks, their fingers deft and practiced. "These markings are rarely used anymore," the kind-eyed woman whispered when the supervisor stepped away. "They were once applied to royal consorts during the ancient times, before the Great War. I haven't seen them used in decades." The sun finally touched the horizon, painting the sky with shades of red and orange that entered through the high windows. A guard entered the room and gestured for her to follow. On trembling legs, she walked through the decorated corridors of the palace, climbing marble staircases, passing through increasingly ornate doors until they reached the royal wing. The palace itself was a marvel of ancient and modern. Stone walls inscribed with protective runes stood alongside reinforced barriers that hummed with energy. Crystal orbs mounted in wall sconces illuminated their path with steady, unwavering light. Another example of the technology-magic fusion that defined their civilization. They passed a gallery lined with portraits of previous rulers. Serena noticed that King Darius appeared in many of the war paintings, younger versions of him leading charges, negotiating treaties, or standing vigil over fallen comrades. One particular painting caught her attention, Darius kneeling before an older alpha, receiving the crown of the unified territories. His eyes, even in the painting, seemed hollow, as if he already carried the burden of loss. Two enormous guards flanked a massive dark wood door, carved with scenes of battle. They regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and pity before making way. The guard who accompanied her made a brief nod. "May the moon goddess have mercy on you, Omega," he murmured, almost inaudibly, before pushing the door. Serena took a deep breath, clutching the wolf pendant one last time before releasing it against her chest. Then, with her heart thundering and legs nearly giving way, she entered the chambers of the Alpha King, not knowing if she would see the dawn again. The door closed heavily behind her, the sound of the lock echoing like a final sentence. The king's chambers were immense, much larger than she could have imagined. An antechamber opened into a large room, dominated by a stone fireplace where a vigorous fire crackled. The walls were covered with dark wood and decorated with ancient weapons, maps of the territories, and tapestries that told stories of bloody battles. The floor was covered with animal pelts, some from enormous wolves, others from bears and creatures she had never seen. In the center stood a massive wooden table with fruits, bread, and wine. Further on, elevated on a small platform, was a monstrous bed with carved columns and dark fabric curtains partially closed. The air carried his scent, musk, cedar, and something primitive that made her Omega instincts awaken against her will, but the king was nowhere to be seen. "Enter completely. I don't like to be kept waiting." The voice came from a large balcony whose existence she hadn't noticed. He was outside, a dark silhouette outlined against the rapidly darkening sky. "Close the balcony doors when you enter," he ordered without turning. She crossed the room and reached the circular balcony, which offered an impressive view of the kingdom. The mountains in the distance, the dense forests, the river that wound like a silver ribbon under the last glare of the day, and below, the city with its lights beginning to dot the growing darkness. Beyond the city walls, Serena could see the shimmering energy barrier that protected the capital, a dome of translucent blue that rippled occasionally like water, powered by the ancient runestones positioned at strategic points throughout the territory. The barrier technology was the crown jewel of their civilization, developed during the Unification Wars and perfected under Darius's reign. The king was leaning on the stone balustrade, his muscular arms stretched out, his fingers pressed so hard against the stone that they seemed to want to crush it. She closed the double wooden and glass doors behind her, isolating them from the warmth of the room. The night air was cold, and her thin tunic offered no protection. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked, still with his back to her. "To survive the night, my king," she answered, hating the tremor in her voice. He turned then, and for the first time she could see him without the formality of court. He had removed his ceremonial tunic and wore only black leather pants and boots. His bare torso revealed battle scars, some ancient, others still pink. He wasn't just a ruler, he was a warrior. "And do you believe you will succeed?" "I don't know, my king." "Darius," he said, surprising her. "When we are alone, you may call me by my name." This was so unexpected that she was left speechless. An Omega calling an Alpha by his first name was unthinkable. Calling the king by his name was practically sacrilege. He walked toward her, his movements those of a predator, fluid, powerful, inevitable. He stopped less than an arm's length away, observing her with those icy blue eyes that seemed to penetrate her soul. "You said you sense the emotions of others. What do you sense in me now, Serena?" Hearing him pronounce her name sent a wave of heat down her spine. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing her gift to open channels she normally kept blocked. Immediately, she was struck by the emotional storm that was Darius, layers upon layers of buried feelings, like a deep and turbulent ocean beneath an apparently calm surface. "Anger," she whispered, opening her eyes. "So much anger, pain, an old pain that never fully healed, loneliness." She hesitated, uncertain whether she should continue, and his gaze intensified. "Fear?" she completed, knowing she was risking her life by saying this. "Not a common fear, but fear of something I cannot clearly identify." He inhaled sharply, as if she had hit a sensitive point. His hand rose, and for a moment she thought he would strike her. Instead, his fingers touched her face with surprising gentleness, tracing the line of her jaw. "Interesting. The others lied, tried to please me. You speak the truth, even if it might kill you." "What good is lying to someone who can tear out my throat with one bite?" The words escaped before she could contain them. To her surprise, Darius laughed. Not a bitter laugh like before, but something almost genuine, too brief to be classified as joy, yet real enough to transform his face for a second. "Come," he said, opening the balcony doors and guiding her back to the warmth of the room. "You're freezing, and I don't want you to die of cold before we have our conversation." Conversation? So that was what he called what would happen between them. The word seemed strangely inadequate for the situation, an Omega brought to the king's chambers on the night of the selection ceremony. Darius led her to the fireplace and indicated a upholstered chair. She sat, grateful for the warmth that began to thaw her chilled skin. He moved to a side table and poured 2 glasses of wine, offering her one. "Drink," he ordered, not as a suggestion, but without the harshness of before. She accepted the glass and took a small sip. The wine was sweet and strong, nothing like the watered-down drink served in the villages. She felt the warmth descend her throat and spread through her body. Through the large windows, the last light of day faded into darkness. Stars appeared in the night sky, twinkling distantly against the infinite blackness. Below, the city lights glowed more brightly, and the energy barrier surrounding the capital shimmered with renewed intensity, its blue glow more visible against the night. 12 years ago, he began, sitting in a chair across from her, my destined mate was murdered. The declaration caught her completely off guard. Of all the things she expected to hear, this wasn't on the list. She was an Omega like you, not of high lineage, not trained for court, simply someone with whom I shared an instant connection. He swirled the wine in his glass, watching the liquid as if he could see the past reflected in it. We were 17. I wasn't yet king, just the eldest son of the reigning Alpha. The war to unify the territories was at its height. My father sent me to negotiate an alliance with the southern Pax. He took a long drink, his eyes distant with memory. That's where I met her. Celine, daughter of Richard, my father's chief strategist. She was helping tend the wounded when our caravan arrived. One look, and I knew. Serena drank a little more, not knowing how to respond. The pain in his voice was palpable, even without her gift. "Do you know what happens when an alpha finds his true destined mate?" he asked. "The ancient stories speak of an immediate recognition, a connection that transcends the physical," she answered cautiously. "But many say they are just legends." "They are not legends." His voice hardened. "It's real as the air we breathe. And when that connection is broken—" He didn't complete the sentence, but he didn't need to. Serena could sense the void that loss had left, a black hole that seemed to suck in all light around him. "I'm sorry," she murmured. And she truly was. Not just because of the protocol that required compassion for superiors, but because his pain reverberated within her in a way she couldn't explain. "For years, I believed I would never find another, that I would spend the rest of my life as half of a whole. And then today, at the ceremony, your eyes met mine." His intense, questioning eyes found hers again. "You felt it too, didn't you?" Her heart accelerated. She knew exactly what he was talking about. That electric current, that sensation of recognition when their gazes crossed. But how could it be possible? A king couldn't have two destined mates in one lifetime. This had never been recorded in the ancient stories. "I felt something," she admitted, unable to lie under that penetrating gaze. "But I don't understand what it means." Darius rose abruptly, placing his glass on the table with enough force to nearly break it. He paced the room like a caged animal, tension radiating from his body in waves that she could perceive even without using her gift. "After Celine died, I swore I would find and destroy everyone involved in her assassination, and I fulfilled that promise." His voice lowered to almost a growl. "But I also swore that I would never again allow anyone to get close enough to become a weakness, a weapon against me." He stopped suddenly and faced her. "That's why the other Omegas died?" My question hung in the air like a charged cloud. For a moment, she thought she had gone too far. Darius's face transformed into a mask of contained fury. "I didn't kill them, if that's what you're asking," he replied with forced calm. "They couldn't withstand the proximity. My presence, what remains of me after the broken bond, is toxic to common Omegas." "What do you mean?" "An alpha with a broken destined bond is poisonous. My inner wolf is in constant torment, anger, and pain. The Omegas who were brought to my chambers, all chosen by advisors who thought they could heal their king, simply couldn't bear it. Some had convulsions, others bled from their eyes. The last entered a catatonic state and never woke up." A shiver ran down her spine. It wasn't a mystical curse, but something almost worse, a physical reaction to proximity with an alpha whose inner balance had been shattered. "And you believe I will be different?" she asked, surprised by her own boldness. Darius approached again, leaning over her chair, his hands resting on the arms, trapping her in place. His face was so close that she could feel his hot breath against her skin. "You're already being different. You should be trembling, crying, or unconscious by now." His eyes scanned her face, looking for signs of distress. "But your heart, though accelerated, is regular. Your pupils are not dilated with terror, and most importantly, he inhaled deeply near her neck, making her shudder. Your scent hasn't changed to indicate extreme fear or pain. It was true. Although frightened, she didn't feel the paralyzing terror that would be expected. There was something about Darius that paradoxically calmed her, even as it terrified her. "Perhaps my gift protects me somehow," she suggested. "If I can sense others' emotions, maybe I can filter them." He retreated slightly, considering the idea possible. Or perhaps... A strong knock at the door interrupted what he was about to say. Darius straightened, his face assuming once again the cold mask of the king. "Enter," he ordered. The door opened to reveal Victor Blackthorne, accompanied by 2 guards. His eyes quickly scanned the room, observing that Serena was still dressed and apparently unharmed, sitting calmly near the fire. "Forgive the intrusion, my king," he said with a deep bow, "but there is a situation that requires your immediate attention. Messengers from the Northern Territory have arrived with urgent news." Darius frowned. "Can it not wait until tomorrow?" "I fear not, my king. It appears there has been an attack on the border village of Silver Hill." Serena's blood froze in her veins. Silver Hill was 2 days' journey from her village. "Many dead and—" Victor hesitated, looking at her with suspicion. "And?" Darius pressed. "The survivors report that the attackers were specifically looking for Omegas with certain gifts. More troubling still, the attackers bore the insignia of an empire that Darius believed he had destroyed 3 decades ago, the Blood Moon Empire, former enemies who had almost defeated the 7 territories before Darius led the final campaign against them." "Mother," Serena murmured involuntarily. Darius looked at her quickly, capturing her expression of horror. "You know someone in this village?" "My mother. She is a healer and frequently visits Silver Hill. If they were looking for Omegas with gifts—" A dark understanding crossed the king's face. He turned to Victor. "Prepare the council chamber. I will be there momentarily." The advisor cast a calculating look in Serena's direction before withdrawing with the guards. When the door closed, Darius approached again. "This is no coincidence," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "On the same day you appear at court, there is an attack directed at Omegas with gifts. Are you suggesting I have something to do with this?" she asked indignantly despite her fear. "No," he shook his head. "I am suggesting that you might be the target, or part of something bigger." His gaze intensified. "You will stay here until I return. Don't try to leave. The guards have orders not to let anyone in or out." He walked to a cabinet and took a tunic, putting it on quickly. Before leaving, he turned to her one last time. "If you truly are what I think you are, this night has just become much more dangerous for us both, and not just because of what happens between an Alpha and an Omega." With those enigmatic words, he left, the sound of the door closing like a harbinger of storm. Serena remained alone in the king's chambers, her heart divided between fear for her mother and confusion about what Darius had insinuated. What was she, after all, and what had he recognized in her that seemed to shake his foundations? She clutched the wolf pendant between her fingers, remembering her grandmother's words, "You see beyond what they can perceive." Perhaps it was time to start looking more deeply, not just at others, but at herself. As the moon rose high in the night sky, casting silver light through the tall windows of the royal chamber, Serena felt the first stirrings of something awakening within her, something beyond the simple gift of sensing emotions, something that had been dormant, waiting for this moment, this recognition, this destined encounter with the Wolf King. Time slipped away quietly in the king's chambers. Left alone after Darius's abrupt departure, Serena found herself in the strange position of exploring the private domain of the most powerful Alpha in the 7 territories. The enormous room told more about the man than hours of conversation might have revealed. The walls held not just weapons and battle maps, but also books. Hundreds of them lined custom-built shelves, their leather bindings worn from frequent handling. Serena ran her fingers across their spines, surprised to discover volumes on history, philosophy, medicine, and even poetry. This was not what she expected from a warrior king known for his ruthlessness on the battlefield. A collection of crystal orbs arranged on a table near the window caught her attention. Unlike the illumination crystals that lit the palace, these contained what appeared to be miniature landscapes, a mountain range, a forest, a desert. When she touched one hesitantly, it glowed faintly, and she felt a slight vibration. These were far beyond the simple protection amulets she had seen in her village. These were sophisticated monitoring devices, showing real-time images of different territories within the kingdom. Above the massive fireplace hung a portrait that dominated the room, a young woman with dark hair and large, expressive eyes that seemed familiar in a way Serena couldn't immediately place. She stood before it, transfixed. This had to be Celine, Darius's lost mate. Though the woman's features were different from Serena's, her hair dark where Serena's was fair, her frame more delicate, there was something in the expression, in the eyes particularly, that stirred an uncomfortable sense of recognition. She was beautiful, wasn't she? Serena whirled around, startled by the unexpected voice. An older woman stood near a side door, partially hidden by a tapestry. She carried a tray with food and a carafe of water. "Forgive me, my lady. I didn't expect to find you." The woman paused, studying Serena with evident surprise. "Conscious?" Serena suggested. "Yes," the woman confirmed, placing the tray on a table. "I am Eleanor, head housekeeper of the royal wing for 70 years now. I've served 3 kings, though none as long as Darius." "The others?" Serena asked tentatively. "The other Omegas who were brought here before me?" Eleanor smoothed her apron nervously, glancing at the door. By this hour they were usually indisposed. The king's presence affects Omegas strangely. It's as if their bodies reject his proximity. Serena approached the tray, realizing how hungry she was. "The king said his presence is toxic to common Omegas because of his broken bond. Is that possible?" Eleanor checked the door again, ensuring they were alone. "It's his fractured energy, my lady. When an alpha loses his destined mate, something breaks inside him. It's like darkness settling in his soul. For most Omegas, being near him is like trying to breathe smoke. It slowly suffocates them." "But I'm not feeling that," Serena confessed, touching her own neck, as if to confirm she was still breathing normally. Eleanor's eyes widened. "Then perhaps the rumors are true." "What rumors?" "That the king has found another, that the prophecy of the 2 bonds has finally been fulfilled." "Prophecy? What prophecy?" Before Eleanor could answer, they heard footsteps approaching the main door. She quickly adjusted the tray and assumed a submissive posture. "Eat, my lady. You'll need your strength," she whispered, before making a curtsy and exiting hurriedly through the side door. The main door opened, and a tall man with a scarred face entered. Unlike the formal guards who had escorted her, he wore practical battle gear that had seen considerable use. His posture was alert, but relaxed in a way that spoke of decades of combat experience. "The king sent me to check on you," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "I'm Marcus, captain of the Royal Guard." Serena nodded, studying him. Despite his intimidating appearance, she sensed no malice from him, only a steady loyalty and curiosity. "Is there news of the attack? Of my mother?" she asked. Marcus's expression softened slightly. "We're gathering information. The king thought you might want these while you wait." He reached into a pouch at his belt and produced several small scrolls. Reports from the northern scouts about Silver Hill and surrounding villages. Serena accepted them gratefully. "Thank you. This is unexpected kindness." A ghost of a smile crossed Marcus's scarred face. The king can be kind when he chooses to be. Few see that side of him anymore. "You've served him long?" 30 years, since before he was king." Marcus moved to the window, gazing out at the night sky. "I was there when he united the territories. I was there when he lost Celine." Serena felt a sudden impulse to understand more. What was she like? Marcus turned, studying her with renewed interest. She was light personified, not just kind, but radiant with it. She could walk into a room of wounded soldiers and somehow make them forget their pain. He paused, his gaze intense. "You remind me of her, though not in appearance. It's something else, something in your presence." He moved toward the door, then stopped. Before Celine was killed, Darius was different. He laughed. He had hope for the future. His voice lowered. "I never thought I'd see that hope again, until today, when he looked at you." With that cryptic statement, he nodded respectfully and left, the door closing firmly behind him. Serena sat at the table and unrolled the first scroll. The reports contained details of the attack on Silver Hill, the time, the number of assailants, the pattern of their search. They had moved methodically from house to house, ignoring valuables, focusing solely on identifying Omegas with special abilities. What disturbed her most was the final scroll, which contained eyewitness descriptions of the attackers. They wore armor bearing the insignia of the Blood Moon Empire, a crimson moon partially eclipsed by shadow. But the Empire had been defeated decades ago in the final campaign of the Unification Wars. Their reappearance now, specifically targeting Omegas with gifts, couldn't be coincidence. Time passed as Serena pored over the reports. Eventually, the massive door opened again, and King Darius entered. His expression was grim, his shoulders tense with the weight of new burdens. When his eyes found hers, something flickered in them. Surprise, then relief. "You're still well," he stated, approaching her. It wasn't a question, but there was an undertone of amazement in his voice. "Did you expect otherwise, my Kay? Darius?" The use of his name felt strange on her tongue, intimate in a way that made her heart quicken. He studied her for a long moment. Yes, by now, all the others had succumbed in some way. "Perhaps I am stronger than I appear." A minimal smile touched his lips. "Perhaps you are." He noticed the scrolls on the table. "I see Marcus brought you the reports." "Is there news of my mother?" Darius removed his formal outer garment and poured himself a glass of water. "We've dispatched scouts to all surrounding villages. So far, there is no Maria listed among the dead or missing in Silver Hill. If your mother was there, she likely escaped or wasn't in the village during the attack." Relief washed through Serena, though concern remained. If they were hunting Omegas with gifts, her mother was still in danger, as was she if she left the palace. "Why would someone do this?" she asked. "Why hunt Omegas with abilities?" Darius walked to the window, observing the night outside. "There have been rumors for some time about a secret cult in the mountains beyond the Northern Territory. They believe they can channel the power of special Omegas to create a new race of super alphas. Is that possible? Not in the way they believe, but that doesn't stop them from trying." He turned to face her, his gaze intense. "What concerns me is the coincidence. This attack occurring precisely when you appear at court. You think someone followed me here? That they knew about me?" "I don't know, but there's something more." He hesitated, as if weighing his next words. "The prophecy of the two bonds. Have you heard of it?" Serena remembered Eleanor's words moments before. "The housekeeper mentioned something about it before you arrived. She said there were rumors about it being fulfilled." Darius inhaled deeply. "It's an ancient legend, considered absurd by most. It says that once every 1,000 years, an alpha can have two destined mates in one lifetime. But that's not possible. The destined bond is unique." "Theoretically, yes." He approached again, his eyes never leaving hers. "But the prophecy speaks of a special case. If the first mate dies violently before the complete consummation of the bond, a second may emerge, not to replace the first, but to complete what remained unfinished." Serena's heart accelerated. "And you think I don't know what to think." He answered with surprising honesty. "All I know is that you should be suffering just by being in my presence, like all the others, but you're not. And when I look at you—" He paused, closing his eyes for a moment, as if to contain himself. "When you look at me?" she insisted, needing to hear what he felt. "When I look at you, something that was dead inside me seems to awaken. It's painful and terrifying, like blood flowing back into a frozen limb." That confession, so raw and honest, left her speechless. She could feel the vulnerability behind that admission, how much it cost such a powerful alpha to acknowledge that weakness. "And what does the rest of the prophecy say?" she asked softly. "What happens with the two mates?" A bitter smile touched his lips. "That's where the story becomes even more fantastic. It says the second mate carries the essence of the first within her, that somehow their souls are connected across time." Like reincarnation? The idea seemed absurd, yet something within her resonated with those words. Not exactly, but like a continuation, a thread that was cut but found a new path. He moved away, as if the proximity suddenly became unbearable. Obviously, they're just ancient legends, stories to console alphas who have lost their mates. But there was something in his voice indicating he didn't completely believe this, and truthfully, neither did Serena. From the moment their gazes met at the ceremony, she had felt a connection that went beyond the normal attraction between alphas and omegas, as if part of her recognized him from a previous life. "You said Celine was assassinated," she commented cautiously. "Did you discover who did it?" Darius's face transformed instantly, all vulnerability being replaced by cold fury. "Yes, it was the same group now hunting omegas with gifts, the Black Moon cult." "And did you punish them?" "I destroyed every cell of the cult I could find." His eyes flashed with an ancient fury. "I spent years hunting them, exterminating them like the plague they are. But like weeds, they always come back. They hide, recruit new members, resurface when least expected." "And now you think they're back?" "They never completely left." He walked to the fireplace, observing the flames. "But there's something different this time. They're bolder, more organized, as if they've found new leadership." A dark suspicion began to form in Serena's mind. What if it's someone close to you? Someone in the palace?" Darius turned abruptly. "What makes you think that?" "It's just a feeling, but consider this. The attack occurred on the same day as the selection ceremony. Someone knew I would come, someone who perhaps perceived something in me, or in us." Darius's expression darkened further. "If there's a traitor among my advisors—" He didn't complete the sentence, but the implicit threat was crystal clear. "We need to find out who it is," Serena said, surprising herself with the inclusion in that "we." When had the king's problems become hers? "We?" Darius raised an eyebrow. "You speak as if you've already chosen a side in this war, little Omega." "If they're hunting people like me and my mother, I think the side has been chosen for me." She responded with more firmness than she felt. Something changed in Darius's gaze, a glimmer of admiration perhaps. He approached again, this time stopping just a few centimeters from her, so close that she could feel the heat of his body, count each scar on his torso, see the pulse in his neck. "You truly have no fear of me, do you?" "I do," she admitted, "but not in the way I should." His hands found her face, large and calloused, but surprisingly gentle as they framed her cheeks. "There's only one way to discover if the prophecy is true." Her heart accelerated. "Which is?" "The bond between destined mates can only be confirmed one way," he replied, his face descending toward hers. "Through the first kiss. If we are truly destined, we'll feel something indescribable." Time seemed to freeze as his lips hovered millimeters from hers. Part of her wanted to step back, flee from this dangerous man and the storm he brought with him. But another part, a deeper, more instinctive part, craved that contact as a withered plant craves rain. When their lips finally touched, it was as if the entire world exploded in light and sensation. An electric current ran through her body from her toes to the last strand of her hair. Fragmented images flooded her mind, a dark-haired young woman running through a field, a young Darius smiling as she had never seen him smile, blood in the snow, screams in the night, a whispered promise, memories that weren't hers, feelings that seemed to echo from another life. Darius pulled away abruptly, his eyes wide with shock and recognition. "You saw?" She nodded, unable to speak, tears streaming down her face without her knowing why. "The eyes," he murmured, as if finally understanding something. "They're the same eyes. How did I not notice before?" And then Serena understood what had seemed familiar in Celine's portrait. Though physically different, she with fair hair, Celine with dark, their eyes were identical, not just in color, but in expression, in the way they seemed to observe the world. "This is madness," she whispered. "How can I have memories of her? How can I feel as if I knew her?" Darius stepped back, his expression a mixture of wonder and terror. "The prophecy. The second carries the soul of the first. I thought it was just a metaphor." A sudden noise at the door made them jump. 3 quick knocks, followed by 2 slow ones. A code, apparently. "Enter," Darius ordered, his voice instantly recovering the authority of a king. The door opened to reveal Marcus, his expression grim. "Majesty," he said with a brief bow, "forgive the intrusion, but there's news about the attack." "Speak, Marcus." "We found a survivor hiding in the forest near Silverhill, a healer." His eyes shifted briefly to Serena. "She said the attackers specifically mentioned an Omega with the gift of sensing emotions. They were looking for her by name." Serena's blood froze in her veins. "My name?" Marcus nodded. "Serena Silverheart, daughter of Margot. The healer said they were furious when they discovered you had already left for the selection ceremony." Darius turned to her, his expression now entirely that of a protective predator. "They came for you specifically. This is no coincidence." "But why? My gift isn't powerful or useful. Why would they go to the trouble?" "Unless," Darius began, a terrible understanding dawning in his eyes, "unless they also know the prophecy and know something we don't." Marcus cleared his throat discreetly. "There's more, my king. The healer. She said she needs to speak with Lady Serena urgently. She said it's about her true gift." "True gift?" Serena looked between Darius and Marcus, confused. "I don't understand. My gift is sensing emotions. It always has been." "Where is this healer now?" Darius asked. "In the palace infirmary. She's wounded but stable." Darius remained silent for a moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he made a decision. "Marcus, double the guard at all palace entrances. No one enters or leaves without my express authorization. And prepare an escort. We're going to the infirmary." Marcus nodded and left quickly to carry out the orders. Darius turned to Serena. "It seems our night has taken a turn neither of us could have predicted," he said, extending his hand to her. "Are you ready to discover why someone would cross mountains to find you?" She looked at his extended hand, the hand of a king, of a warrior, of a man marked by loss, and perhaps, if the madness of the prophecy were true, the hand of her destiny. "I am," she replied, entwining her fingers with his. As they left the royal chambers, escorted by armed guards, Serena realized that one way or another she would not be free at dawn. Not because the king would break his promise, but because something larger and older than both of them had intertwined their paths. The freedom she feared losing by being chosen no longer mattered. What was at stake now was much greater. Not just their lives, but perhaps the balance of something that had begun 12 years ago with the assassination of a young Omega named Celine. And somehow, inexplicably, she carried part of that legacy in her soul. The corridors of the palace stretched before them, illuminated by the ethereal blue light of the energy crystals. Guards stood at attention as they passed, their eyes widening at the sight of Serena walking beside the king, conscious and apparently unharmed. More surprising still was the way Darius positioned himself slightly ahead of her in a protective stance, his body language unmistakably that of an alpha shielding his mate. As they descended a grand staircase, Serena noticed the palace architecture changing. The upper levels featured ornate decorations, golden accents, and ceremonial designs. The lower they went, the more practical and fortified the surroundings became. The walls thickened, reinforced with metal support structures embedded with protection runes. "The palace was rebuilt after the final battle of the Unification Wars," Darius explained, noticing her interest. "The lower levels are designed to withstand both conventional attacks and energy-based assaults. They can shelter the entire palace staff if necessary." "You built a fortress within a palace," Serena observed. A grim smile touched his lips. "Peace is maintained through strength and preparedness. I've never forgotten that lesson." They passed a hall lined with armor and weapons displays, not ceremonial pieces, but battle-worn equipment from various campaigns. Darius paused briefly before one particular set of armor, smaller than the others and more elegant in design, though no less formidable. "Celine's combat gear," he said quietly. "She insisted on learning to fight, despite tradition dictating that Omegas remain non-combatants. She believed everyone should be able to defend themselves and those they love." The revelation surprised Serena. The portrait in Darius's chamber had shown a gentle, almost ethereal woman, not someone who would don armor and enter battle. "She was training secretly with my father's best warriors when we met," Darius continued, his voice distant with memory. "I found her practicing sword forms at dawn in a clearing. She nearly took my head off when I startled her." For an instant, Serena could almost see it. A forest clearing bathed in morning light, a young woman with dark hair wielding a blade with unexpected skill, a younger Darius watching in admiration. The image felt like her own memory, though she knew it couldn't be. They continued through corridors increasingly populated with medical staff until they reached the palace infirmary, a spacious, well-lit area near the inner gardens. Unlike the stone and metal of the defensive areas, this space featured high windows that would allow sunlight during the day. At night, specialized illumination crystals provided a warm, natural-feeling light conducive to healing. Marcus waited for them outside a private room separated from the main ward by heavy curtains. "She's inside," he said, indicating the doorway. "Stable, but weak from blood loss. The healers have done what they can." Darius nodded. "Keep everyone else out. This conversation remains private." When they entered the room, Serena's heart nearly stopped. On a narrow bed lay a woman with fair hair now streaked with silver, her left arm wrapped in bandages and a dark bruise marking her face. Despite these injuries, Serena would have recognized her anywhere. "Mother!" She rushed to the bedside, completely disregarding protocol or the king's presence. Margot was pale, with bandages wrapping her left arm and a dark bruise on her face, but she was alive. Her eyes, identical to Serena's, opened at the sound of her daughter's voice. "Serena," she murmured, trying to sit up. "Thank the moon goddess, you're safe." Darius approached slowly, observing their reunion with an enigmatic expression. "You're the healer from Silver Hill," he stated. It wasn't a question. Margot looked at the king and, to Serena's surprise, did not lower her eyes as would be expected from an Omega before the Supreme Alpha. Instead, she held his gaze with an almost defiant intensity. "Majesty," she said with a nod of her head that could barely be called a reverence, "we finally meet." There was a strange familiarity in her words, as if she had been expecting this encounter for a long time. "You said you needed to speak with your daughter about her true gift," Darius continued, ignoring the lack of deference. "What gift would that be?" Margot took Serena's hand and squeezed it with surprising strength for someone in her condition. "Serena isn't just an empath who senses emotions," she began. "That's merely the first stage of her true power, a power that has remained dormant until now for protection." "Protection against what?" Serena asked, confused. "Against those who killed Celine, against the Black Moon cult." A heavy silence fell over them. Darius stepped forward, his face a mask of shock and contained fury. "How do you know about Celine? Who are you really?" Margot sighed deeply, as if finally able to release a burden carried for too long. "I was Celine's nurse. I raised her from infancy after her mother died in childbirth." The revelation hit Serena like a physical blow. Her mother had never mentioned this in all her 21 years. She had always thought they had lived their entire lives in that small mountain village. "Why did you never tell me?" she asked, feeling betrayed. "To protect you," her mother answered, her eyes pleading. "When Celine was assassinated, I knew you would also be in danger." "Me? Why?" Darius interrupted them, his voice low and dangerous. "Because you are related," he deduced. "Cousins, perhaps." Margot shook her head. "No, Majesty. Serena is Celine's sister, half-sister to be precise." The world seemed to spin around Serena. What? That's impossible. Your father was the same man, Richard, the former royal advisor. He had a brief affair with me years after Celine was born. When he learned I was pregnant, he sent me away to protect his position at court, but gave me enough gold to live comfortably. The pieces began to fit together. The identical eyes, the sense of familiarity with Celine's memories, the immediate connection with Darius. "Did you know this?" Serena asked the king, her voice trembling. "Did you know I was her sister?" "No," he replied, seeming as shaken as she was. "Richard died shortly after Celine. He took this secret to his grave." Margot continued, her voice more urgent now. "When Celine was assassinated, I knew it wasn't safe for you. The cult didn't want just Celine. They wanted her power, and I suspected you might have inherited the same gift." "What power?" Darius insisted. "Celine could sense emotions like Serena, but that doesn't explain why the cult wanted her dead." "No, Majesty," said Margot, shaking her head. "Sensing emotions was just the beginning. The true gift of Celine, the gift of Richard's daughters, is much rarer and more dangerous." She turned to Serena. "Serena, you don't just sense emotions. You can manipulate them, calm them, or intensify them. With training, you could even transfer them from one person to another." Serena sat open-mouthed. "That's impossible. I would know if I could do something like that." "Not if I had blocked that gift," her mother replied softly, "with an ancient protection magic passed down among healers for generations. The block was supposed to last until you turned 25, old enough to learn to control the power." "But the block could be broken earlier if you found your destined mate." Her eyes turned to Darius. "That's what happened with Celine. When she found the young prince, her power awakened completely, and that's why the cult killed her." Darius closed his eyes for a moment, as if reliving unbearable pain. "They killed her because she could heal the darkness in alphas," he murmured, "because she threatened their power over uncontrolled wolves." "Exactly," Margot confirmed. "The Black Moon cult controls corrupted alphas whose anger and pain have been amplified until they become weapons. They feared Celine's gift because she could reverse this, could calm the storm inside these alphas, free them from mental control." "And now they've discovered Serena," concluded Darius, his posture shifting to something even more protective. "Yes, and not just that," continued Margot, her voice lowering to almost a whisper. "They believe Serena may be even more powerful than Celine because of the prophecy of the two bonds. If a second destined mate emerges, her power is amplified by the essence of the first." Serena felt dizzy with so many revelations. It was too much to process at once. The truth about her origin, about her supposed power, about the connection with Celine and Darius. "Who is leading the cult now?" Darius asked, returning to the most urgent question. "You said they're more organized, more determined." Margot hesitated, looking nervously at the infirmary door. "Someone close to you, Majesty. Someone who has always been waiting for the right moment." "Who?" Darius insisted. Before Margot could answer, the door opened. Victor Blackthorne entered, followed by 4 guards Serena didn't recognize, men with hard expressions and empty eyes. "Forgive the intrusion," Victor said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "but I'm afraid this family reunion needs to be interrupted." Darius immediately positioned himself between Serena and the newcomers, his body language transforming into that of a predator preparing to strike. "Explain yourself, Victor. Why have you brought unauthorized guards into a private royal meeting?" Victor's smile remained fixed, but his eyes grew colder. The 4 men behind him spread out slightly, their hands resting on weapons at their sides. Not the standard-issue swords of the palace guard, but curved daggers with strange runes etched into the blades. "Unauthorized? Oh no, my king. These men have the highest authorization possible, mine." The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The temperature seemed to drop as Darius's fury radiated in waves Serena could almost see. "You forget yourself, advisor," Darius growled, his voice deepening to something barely human. "Your position grants you no authority over the royal guard." "My position as royal advisor? Perhaps not." Victor's demeanor shifted, the respectful mask falling away to reveal something calculating and ancient.
but my position as High Priest of the Black Moon gives me authority over much more than mere guards."
The revelation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Behind Serena, Margot let out a soft sound of distress. "It was you," Darius said, comprehension dawning in his eyes. "All this time." "Indeed, my dear king. For 30 years I've served 2 masters, you publicly and a higher power privately." Serena could sense the mixture of emotions emanating from Darius, rage, betrayal, and beneath it all, a terrible clarity, as pieces of a decades-old puzzle finally aligned. "You ordered Celine's death." It wasn't a question, but Victor answered regardless, with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. "I recognized the threat she posed the moment I saw you together. An alpha king with a mate who could neutralize emotional manipulation? That would have destroyed everything we had worked for generations to build." He gestured dismissively. "The assassination was regrettably necessary, though I must admit, we failed to anticipate the existence of a sister. A rather significant oversight on our part." Margot gripped Serena's hand tightly. "He was Richard's closest friend, his blood brother from the wars. He knew about you, but we managed to disappear before he could act." Victor's eyes narrowed at Margot. "Yes, you were quite clever, changing your name, hiding in that backwater village. It took us years to track you down. By then, the girl's powers were already blocked, making her nearly impossible to detect." "Until the selection ceremony," Serena realized aloud. "Precisely." Victor smiled, seemingly pleased with her quick understanding. "We knew an unmarked Omega of eligible age would be required to attend. All we needed was patience." The 4 guards began to move in a coordinated pattern, spreading further apart to flank them from multiple angles. Serena noticed their eyes, unnaturally dilated, with a strange crimson rim around the pupils. They moved with mechanical precision, like puppets controlled by invisible strings. "You betrayed your oath to the crown," Darius said, his voice deceptively calm, the kind of calm that preceded catastrophic storms. "I swore loyalty to a power greater than any earthly crown," Victor replied. "The Black Moon guides us toward a future where truly powerful alphas will rule without the weakness that omegas like these bring." As they spoke, Serena felt something changing within her. It was as if a dam were breaking, releasing a torrent of sensations she had never experienced before. Suddenly, she could feel not just others' emotions, but see them as vibrant colors in the air. Darius's scarlet rage, Victor's dark purple hatred, her mother's pale blue fear, and more than that, she could sense them as extensions of herself, like threads she could pull or manipulate. "You've made a mistake, Victor," Darius said, his voice too calm for the fury Serena could see emanating from him. "You've revealed yourself too early." "On the contrary," the traitor replied. "I've revealed myself at precisely the right moment, when the second part of the prophecy is about to be fulfilled. We cannot allow her to complete the bond with you. The power that would release—" Without warning, the 4 guards advanced, swords drawn. Darius reacted instantly, moving with the supernatural speed of an alpha at the peak of his powers. He struck down the first guard with a brutal blow, dodged the second, but was at a numerical disadvantage. "Serena!" Margot cried out. "Use your gift, now!" Without knowing exactly what to do, Serena followed her instinct. She focused on Darius's anger, the way it pulsed around him like a scarlet aura. Instead of dampening it, she amplified it, channeling it, giving it form and direction. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Darius roared, a sound that wasn't human, but of the beast that dwelled within him. His eyes flashed with supernatural blue light, and his body seemed to grow, muscles expanding beneath his skin. In seconds, he was no longer just a strong man, but a supreme predator at the height of his fury. The energy barrier surrounding the palace, visible through the high windows, flared in response to the king's transformation, the blue dome intensifying as if drawing power from his rage. Victor retreated, fear finally breaking through his mask of confidence. "Kill them! Kill them all!" While the corrupted guards tried to face Darius, now more beast than man, Serena turned her attention to Victor. She could see the purple thread of his hatred, interwoven with growing strands of yellow fear. Following pure instinct, she mentally grasped that fear and amplified it, transforming it from a weak yellow strand into a golden avalanche. Victor staggered backward, his eyes widening with pure, irrational terror. He began to scream, fighting invisible enemies that apparently only he could see. The fight ended quickly. 3 guards lay on the floor, neutralized by Darius's amplified fury. The 4th had fled, and Victor was cornered against the wall, trembling and babbling incoherently, trapped in the nightmare Serena had created in his mind. Slowly, with conscious effort, she diminished the flow of power she was sending to Darius. His savage form gradually receded, muscles relaxing, eyes returning to normal blue, though they still blazed with the adrenaline of battle. "What did you do?" he asked, looking at Serena with a mixture of awe and reverence. "I used my gift," she replied simply, surprised by her own calmness. "I amplified your rage and directed it, and I amplified his fear until it became paralyzing." "It's just the beginning of what you can do," Margot said, trying to rise from the bed. "With training, you'll not only be able to amplify, but transfer emotions. You can calm the storm inside a maddened alpha, or awaken courage in one who knows only fear." And Darius approached Victor, who now lay on the floor in a fetal position, murmuring disconnected pleas. "What do we do with him? He has information about the rest of the cult. We need to know who else is involved, where they're keeping the kidnapped Omegas." With a resolute nod, Darius called for loyal guards, recognizable by their complete uniforms with a royal emblem. Within minutes, Victor was being dragged to the dungeons, and reinforcements arrived to secure the infirmary. When they were finally alone again, Serena, Darius, and Margot, the weight of everything that had happened fell upon them. Serena's legs weakened, and she would have fallen if Darius hadn't supported her, gently guiding her to sit on the edge of her mother's bed. "It's a lot to process," he said softly, his hand still on her shoulder. "Your origin, your gift, the connection with Celine, and with me." "What happens now?" she asked, raising her eyes to meet his. "You promised I would be free at dawn if I survived the night." A sad smile touched his lips. "And I intend to keep my word, if that's what you wish. You are free to leave, to return to your village, to go wherever you want." Margot watched their interaction with attentive eyes. "The choice must be yours, daughter. But know that your gift, now awakened, will continue to grow. You'll need to learn to control it." "And the cult?" Serena asked. "They won't give up easily. Victor may be captured, but surely there are others." "We will fight them," Darius replied with determination. "Now that we know who to look for inside the palace, we can cleanse the court. As for those outside—" His eyes flashed briefly. "I will hunt them to the last." "Not alone," Serena stated, surprising herself with her boldness. "My gift exists for a reason. If I can help stop them, save other Omegas—" Darius studied her for a long moment, as if seeing something new in her. "You have the same determination she had, the same courage." "We are sisters," she responded softly. "Perhaps it's natural that we share more than just the eyes." "And the bond?" Margot asked. "The prophecy says that only when the second bond is completely formed will the circle close. The ancient wound will heal." Darius and Serena exchanged a meaningful glance. The kiss they had shared hours before had been just the beginning. The destined bond between alphas and omegas was only truly completed through total physical union. The marking, the mutual surrender. "That's something only the two of us can decide," Darius replied, his eyes never leaving Serena's. "When the time is right, if the time is right, there's no rush." Serena agreed, though something inside her protested against this statement. The partially formed bond pulsed between them like a stretched cord, yearning to be completed. The first rays of sunlight began to enter through the high windows of the infirmary. The night that was supposed to determine Serena's freedom had come to an end, but in a way none of them could have predicted. "The sun is rising," Darius observed. "You survived the night in my bed, Omega, though we spent very little time in it." A rare smile illuminated his face. "As promised, you are free." Serena looked at the golden rays that began to light the room. at her mother who watched her with pride and concern, and finally, at Darius, the Alpha King, the man marked by loss, the mate that fate had entwined with her soul in ways they didn't yet fully understand. Free, she repeated, feeling the weight and truth of that word. Free to choose, and I choose to stay. Darius's face transformed with those words, the mask of the severe king falling completely to reveal the vulnerable man beneath. In his eyes, she saw not just desire or relief, but something deeper, truer, the beginning of a healing they both needed. "Then stay," he replied simply, extending his hand to her, not as prisoner or property, but as an equal, as a partner in this fight, as a mate. As the sun rose on the horizon, bathing the room in golden light, Serena realized that the night of trial had ended very differently than she had feared. She hadn't just gained her freedom, she had gained a purpose, a truth about herself, and a connection that transcended time and death. The wolf pendant her grandmother had given her rested against her chest, the crystal sparkling in the morning light. You see beyond what they can perceive. She finally understood the meaning of those words. She could see beyond masks, beyond emotional armors, beyond buried secrets. She could see the path to heal even the deepest wounds, like the one Darius had carried for 12 years, like the ones the cult created in their victims. And now, with her gift awakened and her true nature revealed, she could finally see her own destiny unfolding before her, not as a sentence, but as a choice. Her choice. "Let us hunt together," she said to Darius, her voice firm with newfound confidence. "Let's find the kidnapped Omegas, destroy the cult, and create a world where no one needs to hide who they truly are." His eyes shone with renewed determination, and something more, a spark of hope long absent. "Together," he agreed, squeezing her hand. And so, under the rising sun of a new day, the Omega who survived the night in the Alpha King's bed found not just her freedom, but her true power and her place in the world, not as servant or subject, but as equal, as partner, as destined mate. The second half of an ancient prophecy, the beginning of a new era. The broken circle was finally beginning to close. In the days that followed, Serena's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. The palace, once a place of terror and uncertainty, became her new home, though not without challenges. The king's chambers, where she had expected to spend only a single night, now housed both of them, though Darius, honoring the delicate nature of their evolving bond, had a separate sleeping area prepared for her within his suite. The physical attraction between them was undeniable, nearly overwhelming at times, but they silently agreed to proceed with caution. The partial bond they shared was already powerful. Completing it would be irrevocable and profound. Training to control her newfound abilities became Serena's primary focus. Each morning, she worked with Margot in a secluded courtyard garden, learning to harness the emotional energies she could now perceive so vividly. "Emotions are like water," Margot explained during one session, as Serena attempted to redirect the anxiety of a palace servant who had volunteered to help. "They flow naturally in certain patterns. Your gift isn't to create emotions from nothing, but to redirect existing currents, to dam them up or release them." The servant, a young beta named Lily, sat nervously across from Serena. "I'm still anxious about my evaluation with the head housekeeper tomorrow," she admitted. "Focus on her anxiety," Margot instructed Serena. "See it as a color, a texture, a flow. Don't try to eliminate it. That's impossible. Instead, find another emotion within her that you can amplify to balance it." Serena closed her eyes, seeing the swirling yellow-green tendrils of anxiety emanating from Lily. She searched deeper, finding a small but steady blue glow of confidence buried beneath layers of nervous energy. With gentle mental effort, Serena reached for that confidence, coaxing it outward, allowing it to grow and expand until it balanced the anxiety without eliminating it completely. Lily gasped softly. "That's remarkable," I still care about tomorrow, but I suddenly remember all my training, all the times I've succeeded. I feel capable. Margot nodded approvingly. Perfect balance. You didn't artificially remove her concern. That would be unnatural and potentially harmful. You simply helped her access her existing strengths. These training sessions often left Serena exhausted, but exhilarated. Each day brought new discoveries about the extent and limitations of her abilities. She learned that she couldn't create emotions that weren't already present in some form, couldn't force someone to feel something entirely foreign to their nature. But she could amplify, diminish, redirect, and even transfer emotional energies between willing subjects. The most challenging aspect was understanding the responsibility that came with such power. Margot was adamant that Serena develop not just skill, but ethics in using her gift. This ability exists for healing, not control, she repeatedly emphasized. The Black Moon cult perverts similar gifts to dominate and manipulate. Your path must be different. When not training with her mother, Serena spent hours in the palace library researching the prophecy of the two bonds. The ancient texts were fragmented and often contradictory, but certain patterns emerged. The phenomenon was exceedingly rare, occurring perhaps once every 1,000 years. In each recorded instance, the second mate carried some essence of the first, not a full reincarnation, but what one text called a soul echo. Most intriguing were the references to healing the alpha wound. When a destined mate died violently, especially before the bond was fully consummated, it created a permanent spiritual injury in the surviving alpha, a wound that poisoned their essence and damaged their ability to form connections with others. This explained why Darius's presence had been toxic to ordinary Omegas, but not to Serena, who carried Celine's soul echo within her. Darius himself was often absent during daylight hours, consumed with the task of rooting out Victor's co-conspirators within the palace and planning military operations against known cult outposts. Victor remained imprisoned in the deepest dungeon, resistant to interrogation. Even Serena's ability to manipulate emotions had limited effect on him. Years of cult conditioning had created powerful mental barriers. Their evenings, however, belonged to each other. As sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and crimson, they would meet on the royal balcony, sharing the day's discoveries and challenges. These quiet moments became precious to them both, a respite from the storm gathering around them, an opportunity to explore their connection in safety. During one such evening, as they watched the energy barrier shimmer with the day's final light, Darius shared something he had never told another living soul. "The night Celine died," he began, his voice low and controlled. "I felt it happen. We were hundreds of miles apart. I was leading a campaign in the Western Mountains, and she was here at the palace. But our bond was strong enough that I felt the exact moment the assassin's blade pierced her heart." Serena remained silent, giving him space to continue. "I collapsed in the middle of a war council. My officers thought I'd been struck by some invisible weapon. In a way, I had been." His hands tightened on the stone balustrade. "I ordered an immediate return to the capital, riding day and night. But I was too late. She was already gone." "What happened then?" Serena asked softly. "Rage happened." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "A rage so consuming that I lost myself to it. For 3 days I couldn't shift back from my wolf form. When I finally did, I was changed, hardened. The young prince who had left for the Western campaign never returned. In his place was someone else, someone who would unite the territories through fear rather than the alliance building my father had envisioned." He turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "I became what they needed, a ruthless war leader, but I lost what I had been." Without thinking, Serena reached out, placing her hand over his on the balustrade. The contact sent a jolt of sensation through them both, the partial bond responding to their touch. "Perhaps that's what the prophecy means about healing," she suggested. "Not just healing the bond, but healing you, helping you find your way back to yourself." He didn't pull away from her touch. "Do you believe that's possible? After all this time?" "I believe we won't know unless we try." Their gazes held for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Then, with visible restraint, Darius gently withdrew his hand. "There will be time for such considerations after we've dealt with the immediate threat," he said, though his voice had softened. "Marcus reports that our scouts have located what appears to be a major cult compound in the northern mountains. We believe that's where they're holding the kidnapped Omegas." "When do we leave?" Serena asked without hesitation. Darius raised an eyebrow. "We? You can't possibly think I would stay behind, not when my gift could be crucial to freeing captives who may be traumatized or under cult control." He studied her for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. 3 days. We depart at dawn. I've already discussed it with your mother, who insists on accompanying us as well. Her healing skills will be needed. "She would never stay behind," Serena agreed, "not when others are suffering." As darkness settled over the palace, they remained on the balcony, discussing strategy and preparations. The coming confrontation would be dangerous, possibly deadly, yet Serena felt a strange calm. For the first time in her life, she was exactly where she was meant to be, doing precisely what she was born to do. The broken circle was beginning to close, just as the ancient prophecy had foretold. What remained unclear was the cost they would all pay for its completion. The morning of their departure dawned clear and cold, the autumn air carrying the first hints of winter. Preparations for the expedition to the northern mountains had consumed the palace for the past 3 days. Serena watched from the royal balcony as soldiers assembled in the courtyard below. A select force of Darius's most trusted warriors, led by Marcus. Each wore specialized protective gear, reinforced with energy-absorbing materials and inscribed with defensive runes. "Our scouts report that the cult compound has its own version of our barrier technology," Darius explained, joining her at the balustrade. "Cruder, but still effective. We believe they're using the captive Omegas' energy to power it. Using people as living batteries," Serena murmured, revulsion tightening her chest. "How is that even possible?" "It shouldn't be." His voice hardened. "The technology was designed with specific ethical constraints. Someone has modified it, perverted its purpose." The past 3 days had been intense for Serena. Beyond her regular training sessions with Margot, she had undergone crash courses in combat fundamentals, mountaineering, and first aid. Her muscles ached from the unaccustomed exertion, but a new strength was developing, not just physically, but in her command of her emerging abilities. Yesterday, she had successfully transferred calm from herself to an agitated horse in the royal stables, preventing what could have been a dangerous situation when the animal was spooked by thunder. The effort had left her drained, but exhilarated. Each small success expanded her understanding of what was possible. "Are you certain you want to do this?" Darius asked, studying her profile. "No one would think less of you for remaining here, where it's safe." Serena turned to face him, her expression resolute. "My safety isn't what matters. Those Omegas need help that only I can provide. Besides," she added with the ghost of a smile, "I've spent my entire life being protected from who I truly am. I'm done hiding." Something like pride flickered in his eyes. "Very well, but promise me you'll stay close to either myself or Marcus at all times. The cult members we'll face aren't ordinary soldiers. They're fanatics, willing to die for their cause." "I promise to be careful," she conceded, "but I won't promise to stay in the background if my abilities are needed." Their gazes locked in a silent battle of wills that ended in mutual respect rather than victory for either side. "The convoy departs in 1 hour," Darius finally said. "Meet me at the eastern gate when you're ready." After he left, Serena returned to her quarters to complete her preparations. The room adjoining Darius's chambers had quickly become her own space, though she'd had little time to personalize it. A wooden chest at the foot of the bed contained her few possessions from village life, alongside new items provided by the palace, practical clothing, a small collection of books on emotional healing, and a journal in which she recorded her daily progress with her abilities. She changed into the specialized gear that had been created for her, a form-fitting ensemble of reinforced fabric in midnight blue, with subtle protective runes embroidered along the seams. Unlike traditional Omega attire, which emphasized submission and decoration, this was designed for movement and protection. The royal tailors had raised eyebrows at Darius's instructions, but complied without comment. As Serena fastened the final clasp on her boots, a soft knock sounded at the door. "Enter," she called, expecting a palace servant with last-minute supplies. Instead, Eleanor appeared, the elderly housekeeper's face grave. "Forgive the intrusion, my lady. I wouldn't disturb you if it weren't important." Serena straightened. "What is it, Eleanor?" The older woman glanced nervously at the open doorway before stepping inside and closing it firmly behind her. From beneath her apron, she withdrew a small package wrapped in aged velvet. "This belonged to Lady Selene," she whispered, extending the bundle. "I was instructed to keep it hidden until the prophecy began to unfold." Serena accepted the package with trembling hands. Instructed by whom? By Lady Selene herself. Eleanor's eyes misted with memory. "The night before she died, she came to me in a state of great agitation. She said she'd had a vision, that she would not live to see the next sunset, but that someday another would come who could complete what she had begun." The velvet fell away to reveal a small book bound in pale leather, its cover unmarked save for a single symbol, a crescent moon encircling a stylized eye. "Her personal journal," Eleanor explained. "She recorded everything there, her developing abilities, her research into the ancient prophecies, and most importantly, her discoveries about the cult's vulnerabilities." Serena stared at the journal in disbelief. Why wasn't this given to Darius after her death? She specifically forbade it. She said the knowledge it contained would be dangerous in anyone's hands but her true successors. The old housekeeper bowed her head. "I have kept my promise for 12 years, waiting for the signs she described. When you survived the night in the king's chambers, when you showed no ill effects from his presence, I knew you were the one." With reverent care, Serena opened the journal to its first page. The handwriting was fluid and precise, so different from her own hurried scrawl, yet somehow familiar, as if she had seen it before. "Does anyone else know about this?" she asked. "No one living," Eleanor assured her. "Lady Selene was most insistent on absolute secrecy." Serena tucked the journal into an inner pocket of her outfit. "Thank you for preserving this. I'll study it at the first opportunity." "There's one more thing," Eleanor added hesitantly. "Lady Selene said that when the time came, I should tell her successor to look beneath the surface of the moon's reflection. I never understood what she meant, but she seemed to think it was vital." "Look beneath the surface of the moon's reflection," Serena repeated, committing the cryptic phrase to memory. "I'll remember." After Eleanor departed, Serena stood motionless for several moments, processing this unexpected development. The weight of the journal against her heart felt significant, as if Selene herself were now traveling with her. With renewed determination, she gathered her remaining supplies and headed toward the eastern gate. The expedition convoy was impressive: 20 mounted warriors, 5 supply wagons, and a specialized medical cart where Margot had arranged her healing supplies. At the head of the formation rode Darius, resplendent in battle gear that combined ancient design with modern protective technology. The crown he wore for formal court functions had been replaced by a simpler circlet of dark metal, marking his status while allowing for the practicalities of travel and potential combat. Marcus approached as Serena arrived, leading a sleek chestnut mare equipped with custom saddle and gear. "Your mount, Lady Serena. She's even-tempered but responsive. One of our finest." Serena stroked the horse's neck, establishing an immediate connection with the animal. With her enhanced sensitivity, she could feel the mare's calm curiosity. "Thank you, Marcus. She's beautiful." "The king insisted you have the best," he replied with a knowing glance toward Darius, who was engaged in last-minute consultation with his officers. As Serena mounted, adjusting herself in the saddle, Margot rode up beside her on a sturdy gray gelding. The older woman looked remarkably at home on horseback for someone who had ostensibly spent decades in a remote village. "You appear to have retained your equestrian skills," Serena observed quietly. Margot's mouth curved in a slight smile. Some abilities never truly fade, no matter how long they lie dormant, rather like your gift. Before they could continue their conversation, Darius raised his hand, signaling for attention. The courtyard fell silent. "Our mission is clear," he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly to every member of the party. "We ride to liberate innocent Omegas held captive by the Black Moon cult. Our intelligence suggests they are being used to power experimental technology, a perversion of everything our society stands for." His gaze swept the assembled warriors, making eye contact with each in turn. "This is not merely a rescue mission. It is a reckoning. For 12 years, this cult has operated in the shadows of our kingdom. Today, we bring their darkness into the light." A murmur of approval rippled through the ranks. Serena observed the effect Darius had on his followers, not just respect based on rank, but genuine loyalty earned through shared hardship and proven leadership. "We journey first to the village of Mistral Pass," he continued. "From there, our scouts will guide us to the hidden compound. The journey should take 4 days, terrain and weather permitting." With a final nod to his captains, Darius wheeled his massive black stallion toward the gate. "For the 7 territories," he called out, the traditional battle cry of their unified lands. "For the 7 territories," came the resounding response. The convoy moved out in precise formation, passing through the palace gates and into the city beyond. Citizens lined the streets, watching with a mixture of curiosity and pride as their king rode forth in full battle array for the first time in years. Serena rode between Margot and Marcus, absorbing the sights and sounds of the capital as they passed through its concentric rings. The inner city housed nobility and wealthy merchants, its architecture grand and imposing. The middle ring contained markets, craftspeople, and professional establishments. The outer ring, more densely populated, was home to ordinary citizens, a vibrant, chaotic contrast to the ordered luxury of the palace. Throughout their passage, Serena noticed how the energy barrier above them shifted subtly in response to Darius's presence, as if the very defenses of the realm recognized their creator and master. "The barrier technology was his innovation," Marcus explained, noticing her upward gaze. "Before the unification, each territory had its own defensive systems, primitive, inefficient. Darius combined the best elements of each, creating something entirely new." "It's remarkable," Serena acknowledged. "In my village, we had only basic protection amulets. I never imagined anything on this scale." "That was deliberate," Margot interjected. "Remote villages were kept technologically simple to avoid drawing attention. The fewer connections to the central government, the less likely the cult would notice us." "A strategy that worked for many years," Marcus conceded, "until recently." As they passed through the final city gate and onto the northern road, the landscape opened before them, rolling hills giving way to denser forests in the distance, and beyond those, the shadowy outlines of the northern mountains. Somewhere in those remote peaks lay their destination, and the answers to questions that had shaped Serena's life without her knowledge. She touched the hidden pocket containing Celine's journal, eager to explore its contents, but aware that privacy would be scarce during travel. The mystery would have to wait a little longer. The first day's journey proceeded without incident, the convoy maintaining a steady pace along the well-maintained Royal Highway. By late afternoon, they had covered significant ground, reaching a designated way station where preparations had been made for their overnight stay. The way station was a fortified outpost, one of many established throughout the territories to facilitate safe travel and rapid communication. As servants and soldiers established the camp, Darius called his inner circle, Marcus, Serena, and Margot, to a strategy meeting in the station's central building. Maps were spread across a heavy wooden table, the terrain marked with precise notations indicating reported cult activity. Marcus pointed to a heavily forested valley nestled between 2 mountain peaks. "Our latest intelligence places the compound here, approximately 2 days' journey from Mistral Pass. The approach is treacherous, a single narrow trail accessible only on foot or horseback." "Defensible," Darius observed, studying the topography. "They've chosen well." "Too well," Marcus agreed grimly. almost as if they had inside knowledge of our patrol routes and blind spots.
Victor's influence, Margot suggested. As royal advisor, he would have had access to all security protocols. Darius's expression darkened. We must assume they know we're coming.
Victor's sudden absence from court would alert his co-conspirators.
Then we need an approach they won't anticipate, Serena said, leaning forward to examine the maps more closely. Is there truly only one path to the compound? Marcus hesitated. There is another way, an ancient hunting trail that skirts the eastern ridge. It's dangerous, largely forgotten, but it would bring us to a position overlooking the compound rather than approaching from below. You didn't mark it on the maps, Darius noted, his tone questioning rather than accusatory. Because I only remembered it this morning, Marcus admitted. It was a path Richard showed me decades ago during a hunting expedition before the Unification Wars. We were tracking a specific type of mountain lion that had been troubling local villages. At the mention of her father's name, Serena felt a strange resonance, as if distant memories were trying to surface.
This Richard, my father, what was he like? Marcus and Darius exchanged glances, clearly surprised by the sudden question.
He was brilliant, Darius finally said. A strategic genius with an unparalleled understanding of terrain and tactics. Before he became my father's chief advisor, he was our foremost explorer and cartographer. And a friend, Marcus added quietly, to both of us. His betrayal cut deeply. Betrayal? Serena looked between them in confusion. Darius's jaw tightened. After Celine's death, evidence emerged suggesting Richard had been working with the cult. Maps of palace security, guard rotation schedules, all found among cult materials recovered from the assassination site.
That's impossible, Margot interjected, her voice sharp with certainty. Richard would never have betrayed Celine or the crown. He adored his daughter, and his loyalty to the royal family was absolute.
The evidence was compelling, Marcus said, though his tone suggested personal doubt. But in truth, he died before a formal investigation could be completed. A hunting accident in the western forests, or so it appeared. You suspect he was murdered? Serena asked, the implications crystallizing in her mind. I have always had my doubts about the official account, Darius acknowledged. Richard was too skilled a woodsman to fall prey to a common hunting hazard. But in the chaos following Celine's death and my father's failing health, a thorough investigation was overlooked. Serena exchanged a meaningful glance with her mother. Another piece of the puzzle, another connection to the present situation. If Richard had been framed and then eliminated, it suggested the cult's infiltration had been even more extensive than they realized. We should use the Eastern Trail, she decided, returning to the tactical discussion. If it was known to my father but not widely documented, there's a chance the cult remains unaware of it.
The risk is considerable, Darius warned. That path hasn't been maintained in decades.
Which is precisely why they won't expect us to use it, Marcus pointed out. Surprise may be our only advantage. After further discussion, the plan was finalized. They would continue along the main road to Mistral Pass as originally intended, maintaining the appearance of a direct approach. Then, under cover of night, a smaller force led by Darius would break away and take the forgotten Eastern Trail, while Marcus would lead the main contingent as a diversion along the expected route. As the meeting concluded, Serena felt a growing anticipation mingled with apprehension. Each step brought her closer to understanding her true identity and purpose, but also to confronting dangers beyond anything she had previously imagined. That evening, with the camp settled and guards posted, she finally found a moment of privacy to examine Celine's journal. Seated in her tent, a single crystal lamp providing soft illumination, she carefully opened the weathered volume and began to read. The earliest entries documented Celine's initial awareness of her gift, the gradual realization that she could sense emotions more acutely than others, followed by the discovery that she could influence them. Her descriptions of the experience matched Serena's own so precisely that it was uncanny, as if she were reading her own thoughts written in another's hand. Further entries detailed Celine's secret training to develop her abilities, often conducted with Richard's guidance. Contrary to being involved with the cult, it appeared her father had been actively researching ways to counter their influence. He had discovered ancient texts suggesting that emotion manipulation abilities were not random mutations, but evolutionary adaptations, natural counterbalances to the sometimes destructive power of alphas. As Serena turned the pages, she found increasingly detailed information about the Black Moon cult, their origins, practices, and most importantly, their vulnerabilities. Celine had been systematically documenting their weaknesses, preparing for some kind of confrontation. The final entries, written in the days before her death, grew more urgent. Celine had uncovered evidence of a plot against the royal family, not just against her personally, but against the entire ruling line. She believed the cult's ultimate goal was not merely to control powerful Omegas, but to replace the legitimate monarchy with puppet rulers. Most disturbing was her last entry, dated the very day of her assassination. "I have seen what is to come, and it terrifies me. The visions grow stronger each day. I see my own end approaching. Inevitable, it seems, but also a new beginning. Someone will come after me, carrying my essence, but with her own strength." To her, I leave this record and a warning. The cult's power comes from corruption at the very center. Trust only those who knew me before. Look beneath the surface of the moon's reflection to find the truth. If you are reading this, my successor, know that what you carry is more than just my spiritual echo. You carry the potential to end what I could not. The ancient texts speak of the second bond as more powerful than the first, not because it replaces what was lost, but because it completes the broken circle with full awareness of what came before. Darius must never blame himself for what will happen to me. Tell him I understood the risk from the beginning. Tell him I would choose the same path again, knowing where it leads. And tell him that the future I glimpsed, though born through pain, holds the possibility of greater joy than either of us imagined possible. The entry ended abruptly, as if Celine had been interrupted in her writing. Serena sat motionless, overwhelmed by the implications. This was not just a personal journal. It was a strategic document, a guidebook left specifically for her. The cryptic phrase Eleanor had mentioned, "Look beneath the surface of the moon's reflection," appeared in the final entry, but without further explanation. What did it mean? What truth was she meant to find? A soft rustle outside her tent preceded a quiet voice. "Serena, are you still awake?" She recognized Darius's voice immediately. Quickly closing the journal and securing it in her pack, she called, "Yes, come in." The tent flap opened, and Darius ducked inside. Even in the dim light, she could see the weariness etched on his features, not just physical fatigue, but the deeper exhaustion of one carrying too many burdens for too long. "I wanted to check on you," he said, remaining near the entrance. "The first day of travel can be taxing for those unaccustomed to it." "I'm fine," she assured him. "My mother made sure I was well prepared for the journey's physical demands." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with her response, yet made no move to leave. Something else had brought him here. "Is there something else?" she prompted gently. Darius hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "I've been thinking about what we discussed earlier, about your father. Richard was more than just my father's advisor or even my mentor. He was the closest thing to a second father I had. His supposed betrayal—" He paused, struggling with the admission. "I never fully believed it, but grief and rage clouded my judgment in those days." "You think he was framed, as my mother suggested?" "I think Victor was methodical in eliminating anyone who might have stood in his way, or who might have protected you and your mother. Richard's death was too convenient, occurring just as questions about the evidence against him were beginning to surface." Serena considered this, connecting it to what she had just read. "In Celine's journal." "You have her journal?" Darius interrupted, visibly shocked. She explained Eleanor's visit and the housekeeper's long-kept promise. "According to Celine's final entries, my father was actively working against the cult, not with them. She believed there was corruption at the very center, presumably of the royal court." "That aligns with what we now know about Victor," Darius mused. but her warning suggests there may be others, possibly still in positions of influence. She also mentioned the moon's reflection hiding some truth we need to find. Serena frowned in concentration. Could it be a physical place? A document? A person? The black moon is their symbol, but a reflection. Darius's eyes suddenly widened with realization. The moon chamber. It's a secure room beneath the palace, used for the most confidential council meetings. Its ceiling is a reflective dome, hence the name. As royal advisor, Victor would have had access. Could he have hidden something there? Possibly. Or the room itself might contain records of meetings where plans were discussed. We'll investigate upon our return. He paused, studying her with an intensity that made her heart quicken. You should rest. Tomorrow's journey will be challenging. As he turned to leave, Serena acted on impulse, reaching out to catch his wrist. The contact sent the now familiar current of energy between them, their partial bond resonating with proximity. Thank you, she said simply, for believing in my father's innocence, for helping me understand who I am and where I come from. Darius looked down at her hand on his, then slowly turned his palm to clasp hers. Perhaps we're helping each other understand who we are meant to become. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then, with gentle reluctance, he released her hand and stepped back. Sleep well, Serena. Dawn comes early in these mountains. After he departed, Serena extinguished the crystal lamp and settled onto her bedroll. Sleep came surprisingly easily, despite the day's revelations and the challenges that lay ahead. In her dreams, she walked through unfamiliar palace corridors alongside a dark-haired woman whose face she couldn't quite see, but whose presence felt like coming home. The circle is nearly complete, the woman said, her voice echoing strangely. But beware the false moon. Its light reveals nothing but lies. Serena woke with the cryptic warning still resonating in her mind, the first rays of dawn filtering through the tent walls, illuminating a new day of discovery and danger that awaited them all. The convoy reached the village of Mistral Pass on the evening of the third day. Unlike the opulence of the capital or the rustic simplicity of Serena's childhood village, Mistral Pass was a frontier settlement, rugged and practical, built to withstand both harsh mountain winters and occasional raids from beyond the territories. Stone buildings with steeply pitched roofs clustered around a central square, their windows narrow and defensible. The villagers, accustomed to military presence due to their strategic location, greeted the royal party with respectful deference rather than excitement. The village elder, a weather-beaten beta named Thorn, met them at the town hall, a 2-story stone structure that doubled as a watchtower. His bow to Darius was perfunctory, suggesting a relationship built on mutual respect rather than ceremonial subservience. "Welcome back to Mistral, Your Majesty," he said, his voice as rough as the mountain granite. "Been some years since you graced us with a royal visit." "Too many years, old friend," Darius replied, clasping the man's forearm in the traditional mountain greeting. "I see you're still stubbornly alive despite your best efforts." A rare smile cracked the elder's severe countenance. "Takes more than these mountains to finish me off. Same could be said for you." His gaze shifted to Serena, his expression sharpening with interest. "And who might this be?" Before Darius could respond, the elder's eyes widened in recognition, or perhaps something deeper. "Those eyes," he murmured. "By the ancient ones. The prophecy." Serena felt the now familiar sensation of being recognized for a connection she was only beginning to understand herself. "I'm Serena Silverheart," she said simply, seeing no reason to hide her identity here. "Silverheart," the elder repeated, looking between her and Margot. "You'd be Richard's get then. He had a cabin not far from here, used it during his surveying expeditions, still standing last I checked." This revelation sparked immediate interest. "You knew my father?" Serena asked. "Knew him well enough. Good man. Never believed the trash they said about him after." He trailed off, glancing apologetically at Darius. "Well, after." "The cabin," Darius interjected. "Where exactly?" "East Ridge, maybe 3 miles from the village. built into the cliff face, easy to miss if you don't know what you're looking for. The elder turned to Marcus. "Your memory still sharp enough to find it, Captain?" Marcus nodded. "I remember." The significance of this information wasn't lost on any of them. A hidden cabin belonging to Richard, possibly containing information relevant to their mission, located near their planned alternate approach to the cult compound. It was too convenient to ignore. "We'll need to adjust our timeline," Darius decided. "The smaller team will depart tonight rather than tomorrow, under cover of darkness. We'll investigate the cabin before proceeding to the compound." While the logistics were being arranged, Serena and Margot conferred privately in the small room they'd been assigned at the village's modest inn. "Did you know about Father's cabin?" Serena asked, unable to keep a hint of accusation from her tone. Margot sighed, running a hand through her silver-streaked hair. "I knew he kept places throughout the territories. Safe houses, he called them. But I didn't know about this specific location." "What else don't I know?" Serena demanded, frustration bubbling to the surface. "My entire life has been built on half-truths and omissions. I deserve the complete story." Her mother's expression softened with regret. "You're right. You do deserve that. But some secrets weren't mine to reveal, and others I kept because knowledge itself was dangerous, for both of us." She reached for Serena's hand. "I never lied about loving you, about wanting to protect you. Everything else was complicated." Serena wanted to maintain her indignation, but the genuine emotion emanating from her mother made it impossible. With her enhanced perception, she could feel the complex layers of Margot's feelings: love, fear, guilt, and underneath it all, a fierce protective instinct that had shaped every decision. "I understand why you did it," Serena conceded. "But from now on, no more secrets between us. Promise me." "I promise," Margot agreed solemnly. "Starting now, there's something you should know about your father's research. He believed the emotion manipulation abilities in Omega bloodlines weren't just random genetic traits, but purposeful adaptations, evolutionary counterbalances to alpha aggression. In the ancient times before recorded history, there was supposedly perfect harmony between alpha strength and Omega empathic abilities. What changed? According to the texts Richard found, a schism occurred. A group of power-hungry alphas began selectively breeding for aggression while systematically eliminating omegas with strong empathic gifts. Over generations, the natural balance was disrupted, leading to the hierarchical society we know today. Serena absorbed this, connecting it to information from Celine's journal. And the Black Moon cult continues this tradition, eliminating empathic omegas who might challenge alpha dominance. "Not just eliminating them," Margot corrected grimly. "Harvesting their abilities through perverted rituals, trying to create alphas who possess both physical dominance and emotional control. It's an abomination of the natural order." Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock. Marcus stood in the doorway, his expression serious. "It's time," he said simply. "The king awaits you at the eastern gate." Night had fully descended on Mistral Pass, the village lights muted to avoid drawing attention from the surrounding wilderness. The smaller expedition team assembled quietly. Darius, Serena, Margot, Marcus, and 4 of the most trusted royal guards, all dressed in dark clothing designed to blend with the mountain shadows. Their horses had been specially selected for mountain travel, sure-footed and quiet, with hooves wrapped in cloth to muffle their steps on rocky terrain. The main contingent would remain in the village, maintaining the appearance of the original plan, before proceeding along the expected route toward the compound at dawn. "The path ahead is treacherous," Marcus warned as they prepared to depart. "Stay close, move only when signaled, and maintain absolute silence." With final nods of understanding, the small group slipped out of the eastern gate and into the waiting darkness. The journey to Richard's cabin was as challenging as promised. The trail, barely visible even in daylight, wound through dense pine forests and across rocky outcroppings. They traveled in single file, Marcus leading with Darius close behind, followed by Serena and Margot, with the 4 guards bringing up the rear. The moonlight filtering through the trees created an eerie landscape of silver and shadow. Occasionally, the distant howl of mountain wolves echoed through the valleys, sending shivers down Serena's spine. These weren't the domesticated wolves of legend, but wild creatures that still roamed the northern territories, distant cousins to the werewolves that had evolved into their human hybrid society. After nearly 2 hours of careful progress, Marcus raised his hand, signaling a halt. He dismounted, gesturing for the others to remain on horseback, and disappeared into what appeared to be solid rock face overgrown with mountain ivy. Moments later, the vegetation parted to reveal a cleverly disguised entrance in the cliff. Richard was nothing if not thorough, Darius murmured, appreciation evident in his tone. They secured the horses in a small clearing adjacent to the hidden entrance, then proceeded single file into what revealed itself as a surprisingly spacious cavern modified into living quarters. Marcus activated ancient illumination crystals embedded in the walls, filling the space with soft golden light. The cabin was more of a research outpost than a residence. One wall was covered entirely with maps, detailed topographical renderings of the surrounding mountains, with annotations in Richard's precise handwriting. Another area held bookshelves filled with ancient texts, scientific instruments, and specimen containers. At the center stood a large stone table covered with papers, journals, and what appeared to be experimental equipment, glass tubes, measuring devices, and crystalline structures whose purpose wasn't immediately obvious. He was studying the energy barriers, Darius observed, examining the equipment. Trying to understand their fundamental principles, Marcus nodded. Richard always believed the barrier technology had applications beyond defense, healing possibilities that were never fully explored. Serena approached the table, drawn to a journal larger than the others, bound in leather similar to Celine's personal diary. She opened it carefully, revealing pages of equations, diagrams, and notes written in a combination of modern language and ancient symbols. "I recognize some of these symbols from Celine's journal," she said, tracing the markings with her fingertip. "They appear in her descriptions of emotional energy patterns." Margot joined her, examining the journal with expert eyes. "These are channeling diagrams," she explained. "Ancient techniques for directing emotional energy into physical manifestations. Healing rituals used the same principles before modern medicine supplanted traditional practices." Darius looked up sharply from a map he'd been studying. Could these techniques be reversed, used to extract emotional energy rather than channel it? "Theoretically, yes," Margot confirmed grimly. "Any channeling system can be corrupted if the underlying principles are understood. It's like diverting a river. The same knowledge that creates irrigation can cause flooding." As they discussed these implications, Serena continued exploring the cabin, her attention drawn to a small alcove partially hidden behind a tapestry. Unlike the research-focused main area, this space felt personal. A simple cot, a small table with a reading lamp, and a wooden chest. The chest was locked, but a familiar symbol had been carved into its lid, a crescent moon encircling a stylized eye, matching the one on Celine's journal. Acting on instinct, Serena removed the journal from her pack and pressed it against the symbol. A soft click emanated from the locking mechanism. Inside the chest lay several objects wrapped in protective cloth. The first was a ceremonial dagger with a crystal blade, its hilt inscribed with the same ancient symbols from the research journals. The second package contained what appeared to be a focusing crystal, larger than those used in everyday illumination, with a complex internal structure that seemed to shift as she examined it. The final item, however, made her breath catch. A detailed map, newer than the others in the cabin, showing the exact location and internal layout of what could only be the Black Moon cult compound. Most significantly, it identified a central chamber deep within the mountain, labeled simply the Harvesting Room. "Darius," she called, her voice urgent. "I think I've found what we need." The others gathered around as she spread the map on the table. Marcus let out a low whistle of surprise. "This is more detailed than any intelligence we've gathered. How did Richard obtain this?" "He didn't," Margot said quietly, pointing to notations in the corner. "These are Celine's markings. She created this map." Darius stared at the document, his expression darkening. She was planning to confront them herself. That's why she was killed, not just because of her abilities, but because she discovered their central operation. The realization hung heavy in the air. Celine hadn't been a random victim, but a deliberate target, an Omega who had come too close to exposing the cult's deepest secrets. "There's something else," Serena said, examining the map more closely. "These markings along the perimeter, they're barrier control points. And this central chamber, according to these notes, it houses some kind of amplification device. The technology they're using to harvest Omega energy," Darius concluded. "If we can disable it, we can free the captives and destroy their power source simultaneously," Marcus finished. They spent the next hour developing a revised assault plan based on this new intelligence. The map revealed not just the compound's layout, but its vulnerabilities: maintenance tunnels, ventilation shafts, and most importantly, the control room for the corrupted barrier technology. "We'll need to split into 3 teams," Darius decided, outlining the strategy. "Marcus will lead the primary assault on the main entrance, a diversion to draw their forces forward. Margot and 2 guards will locate and free the captive Omegas through this secondary passage." He indicated a maintenance tunnel on the eastern side. "Serena and I will target the control room and disable their power source." "It's too dangerous," Margot protested, concern evident in her voice. "Serena's abilities are still developing. She's not ready for direct confrontation with cult leadership." "On the contrary," Darius countered, "her abilities are precisely what we need. According to these notes, the amplification device is keyed to emotional energy signatures. She may be the only one who can neutralize it safely." Serena straightened, meeting her mother's worried gaze. "This is why I'm here. Why we're all here. I can do this." After further discussion, they finalized the plan and prepared to depart. The cabin would serve as their base of operations, allowing them to approach the compound with minimal equipment and maximum stealth. They would rest for a few hours, then begin the final stage of their journey before dawn. As the others settled in for brief rest, Serena found herself unable to sleep. She returned to the main table, studying Richard's research notes more thoroughly. Her father's brilliant mind was evident in every careful observation, every connection drawn between ancient wisdom and modern understanding. One particular passage caught her attention. The key to countering emotional manipulation lies not in resistance, but in redirection. When negative energy is directed at an empath, the natural instinct is to shield or block, a defensive posture that ultimately fails against sustained assault. The more effective technique is to create a circuit, accepting the energy but redirecting it through one's own emotional core, transforming its nature before returning it to the sender. This requires tremendous control, but offers the only true protection against corrupted alpha influence. Serena practiced this concept mentally, imagining emotional energies as colored streams that could be guided and transformed rather than blocked. It aligned with what she had instinctively done when confronting Victor, but suggested a more refined approach that might conserve her own energy. She was so absorbed in these reflections that she didn't notice Darius' approach until he spoke. "You should rest while you can," he said softly, settling into a chair beside her. "The challenges ahead will demand all our strength." "I know," she acknowledged, closing the journal, "but there's so much to learn, so many connections I'm only beginning to understand." Darius studied her with an intensity that might once have made her uncomfortable, but now felt like recognition, one soul truly seeing another. "You remind me of her in moments like this," he said after a pause. "Celine would lose herself in research for hours, making connections no one else saw. But you're not just her echo, Serena. You have your own fire, your own determination." "Is that difficult for you?" she asked carefully. "Seeing her in me, yet knowing I'm different?" His response was measured, thoughtful. "At first it was disorienting. The similarities awakened memories I'd locked away for years. But now—" He reached across the table, his fingers stopping just short of touching hers. "Now I see you clearly, Serena Silverheart. And that clarity brings its own kind of peace." The almost touch between them sparked the familiar resonance of their partial bond. a vibration of possibility that had grown stronger with each day they spent together. "When this is over," he continued, his voice lower, "when the captives are freed and the cult's power broken, we should discuss what comes next, for us, for the bond that connects us." "Yes," she agreed simply, "when this is over." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then, with visible effort, Darius stood. "Rest," he said again, more firmly this time. "Even if just for an hour. I'll wake you when it's time to move." After he left, Serena tried to follow his advice, settling onto a small cot in the corner. Sleep came in fitful bursts, her dreams filled with swirling colors representing emotional energies and a recurring image of a circular chamber bathed in eerie blue light. She woke to Marcus's gentle hand on her shoulder, the mountain darkness still complete outside the cabin's hidden entrance. The others were already preparing, checking weapons and supplies with practiced efficiency. "It's time," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. The final approach to the cult compound took nearly 3 hours of careful navigation through increasingly difficult terrain. They left the horses at a secluded ravine, continuing on foot along a game trail so narrow that at times they pressed their backs against the mountain face to avoid losing their footing. Just before dawn, they reached a rocky outcropping that provided their first view of the target, a structure that appeared to grow organically from the mountain itself, with entrances carved directly into the rock face. Unlike the shimmering blue of the Capitol's protection barrier, the energy shield surrounding this facility glowed with an unsettling reddish hue, pulsing irregularly like a diseased heartbeat. "Life force energy," Margot whispered, her expression horrified. "They're using the captives to power that shield." Marcus adjusted his position, using specialized field glasses to survey the compound more closely. 2 guard stations visible at the main entrance, patrols of 2 moving in 15-minute rotations. Security is substantial but not impenetrable. Darius nodded, his face set with grim determination. "We proceed as planned. Marcus, your team will approach from the north in 1 hour, creating the diversion. Margot, your team will use that opportunity to access the eastern maintenance tunnel. Serena and I will enter through the ventilation shaft on the western face, aiming directly for the control chamber." With final confirmations of timing and emergency protocols, they separated, Marcus and his warriors heading north while the others continued to the western approach point. The ventilation shaft was exactly where Richard's maps indicated, a narrow opening partially concealed by natural rock formations, barely large enough for an adult to navigate. Darius insisted on entering first, despite Serena's objection that her smaller frame would make passage easier. "If there are guards or traps, I'll handle them," he stated in a tone that brooked no argument. With a final nod to Margot and her team, who were continuing around to the eastern approach, he disappeared into the dark opening. Serena waited for his signal, counting seconds that stretched into minutes. Finally, a soft whistle echoed from within. The all clear. She slipped into the shaft, finding it even more confined than it had appeared. The rough stone scraped against her shoulders as she inched forward on her stomach, following the faint sound of Darius's movement ahead. After what seemed an eternity of claustrophobic darkness, the shaft widened into a maintenance corridor dimly lit by emergency lighting strips. Darius waited at the junction, his expression alert as he helped her to her feet. "We're inside the outer perimeter," he whispered, consulting the memorized map. "The control chamber should be 2 levels down from here." They proceeded cautiously through a labyrinth of service corridors, freezing at each sound that might indicate approaching guards. The deeper they penetrated into the facility, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, a heaviness in the air that pressed against Serena's enhanced senses like a physical weight. "Do you feel that?" she whispered, pausing to place her palm against a wall. "It's like pain, absorbed into the very structure." Darius nodded grimly. "The barrier is feeding on suffering. Victor always advocated for research into emotional energy as a power source, but my father prohibited it on ethical grounds. Now I understand why." They reached a secure door marked with the black moon symbol. the entrance to the facility's lower levels. Darius produced a small device from his pack, a security bypass created based on Richard's notes, designed to mimic authorized access signatures. The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a spiral staircase descending into deeper darkness. As they started down, a distant alarm began to wail. "Marcus has begun his diversion," Darius observed, checking the time. "Right on schedule. We have approximately 20 minutes before they realize it's a feint." They increased their pace, descending 2 levels to a corridor that hummed with energy. The lighting here shifted to an unsettling crimson, matching the diseased pulse of the outer barrier. At the end of the corridor stood a massive circular door, reminiscent of ancient bank vaults, but inscribed with the now familiar channeling symbols from Richard's research. Before they could approach, 2 guards emerged from a side passage, dressed in the distinctive black uniforms of cult security. Darius moved with lightning speed, incapacitating the first guard before he could sound an alert. The second reached for a communication device, but Serena acted instinctively, reaching out with her abilities to amplify the man's confusion, disrupting his coordination long enough for Darius to neutralize him. "Impressive," Darius acknowledged as they secured the unconscious guards in a storage alcove. "Your control is improving." "Necessity is an effective teacher," she replied, trying to ignore the throbbing headache that accompanied each use of her abilities. The drain was becoming more manageable with practice, but still significant. The vault door presented their next challenge, a complex locking mechanism requiring both a physical key and what appeared to be a biometric scan. "Victor would have authorization," Darius muttered, examining the security panel. "But without him—" "We don't need him," Serena interrupted, studying the scanner more closely. The device didn't just read fingerprints or retinal patterns. It was designed to detect emotional signatures, a technology she recognized from her father's research notes. "It's keyed to emotional patterns," she explained, specifically the distinctive signature of high-ranking cult members, likely characterized by specific emotional suppressions and amplifications. "Can you mimic such a pattern?" "Not exactly," she admitted, "but I might be able to overload the system." Drawing on her newly discovered capabilities, Serena placed her palm on the scanner and concentrated on projecting a chaotic burst of emotional energies: joy, rage, fear, exhilaration, a cacophony of feeling too complex for the system to process. The scanner flickered, its readout displaying error messages before the entire mechanism shorted out in a shower of sparks. The massive door's locking mechanism disengaged with a series of heavy clicks. "Crude but effective," Darius observed with something approaching admiration. "Your father would be proud." The door swung open to reveal the heart of the cult's operation, the control chamber depicted in Richard's maps. The circular room was dominated by a central column of pulsating energy, blood-red in color, connecting floor to ceiling. Around this column stood a ring of crystalline devices similar to those in Richard's cabin, but larger and clearly corrupted from their original purpose. Most disturbing were the feed lines, tubes of glowing energy extending from the central column and disappearing into the surrounding walls, carrying harvested emotional energy throughout the facility. Monitoring stations surrounded the perimeter, their screens displaying data streams and status reports. "The harvesting nexus," Darius confirmed, his voice tight with controlled fury. "This is where they process the energy extracted from their captives." Serena approached the central column cautiously, her enhanced perception nearly overwhelmed by the concentrated emotional pain contained within it. These weren't just random emotions. This was pure suffering, systematically extracted and refined. "We need to shut it down," she said, examining the control panels surrounding the column. "But carefully. If we disrupt the flow too suddenly—" "It could backfire on the captives," Darius finished. "According to Richard's notes, these systems create dependency. We need to sever the connection gradually." They worked quickly, Darius handling the technical aspects of the system shutdown, while Serena focused on stabilizing the emotional energies, preventing dangerous surges as the power flow diminished. Just as they were making progress, a new alarm sounded, different from the perimeter alert, more urgent and localized. "They've discovered the intrusion," Darius warned, increasing his pace. "We need to complete the shutdown now." Serena placed her hands directly on the central column, using her gift to redirect the harvested energies, creating a closed loop that would gradually dissipate rather than harm the captives upon disconnection. The door they had entered through suddenly slammed shut, followed by the activation of secondary security measures, metal shields descending over the monitoring stations, and a faint hissing sound that suggested the introduction of gas into the chamber. "Hold your breath," Darius ordered, pulling a specialized mask from his pack and pressing it into her hands. "Put this on." Before she could comply, the opposite wall slid open to reveal an unexpected figure, Victor Blackthorne, whom they had left imprisoned in the palace dungeons, flanked by 4 cult soldiers whose eyes glowed with an unnatural crimson light. "How disappointing," Victor said, his voice amplified in the circular chamber. "I expected better security from my subordinates, but at least they managed to alert me to your presence." "You were supposed to be in the palace dungeon," Darius growled, positioning himself between Victor and Serena. Victor smiled thinly. "Did you really think a few stone walls could hold me? I've had contingency plans in place for decades, including loyal followers within your own royal guard. My apparent capture was merely convenient timing." As he spoke, Serena continued her work on the energy column, gradually diminishing its power while appearing to cower behind Darius. The gas filling the room seemed to have no effect on Victor or his guards, suggesting they had been immunized or enhanced to resist it. "I must admit, I underestimated you both," Victor continued, circling the chamber like a predator. Finding Richard's cabin, deciphering Celine's map, impressive detective work, but ultimately futile. "Why, Victor?" Darius demanded, playing for time as Serena's manipulation of the energy system continued unnoticed. "You served my father faithfully for years. What changed?" "Faithfully?" Victor laughed bitterly. "I served as his shadow, his unacknowledged strategist. It was my military expertise that won the unification wars, yet Richard received the credit, the royal appointments, the glory." His face twisted with ancient resentment. "When he found Celine, when she displayed abilities that could have exposed our entire operation, I had no choice but to eliminate her." "Our operation?" Serena questioned, finally stepping forward as the energy column's glow diminished to a dull pulse. "You weren't always the leader, were you?" Victor's expression shifted, revealing momentary surprise at her insight. "Perceptive, just like your sister. No, I wasn't the founder, merely an acolyte who recognized true potential when others clung to outdated ideals of balance and harmony." "The amplification device," Darius said, his gaze shifting to the central column. "It's not just harvesting energy from omegas, it's enhancing alpha aggression as well." "Of course," Victor confirmed with disturbing pride. "The true vision of the Black Moon has always been purification, creating the perfect alpha who needs no omega counterbalance, who can harness emotional energy directly rather than through inferior vessels." As he spoke, Serena sensed fluctuations in the facility's power systems, evidence that Marcus and Margot had succeeded in their objectives. The captives were being freed, and the outer defenses were failing. "Your experiment has failed," she declared, straightening to her full height. "Your captives are being released as we speak. Your barrier is collapsing." Fury contorted Victor's features. "You think this is our only facility? Our only research? Naive child, this is merely one branch of a movement that spans all 7 territories." He gestured to his guards, who advanced with weapons drawn. "Kill them both. The girl first. I want him to watch her die, as he watched Celine die." What Victor hadn't noticed, what Serena had been carefully concealing, was that her manipulation of the central column hadn't just been shutting it down. She had been redirecting its harvested emotional energy, storing it like a coiled spring waiting for release. As the guards advanced, she released that accumulated power in a focused burst, not toward the guards, but into Darius himself. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying.